find ourselves here today in the wake of three terrible tragedies. Number one, the loss of the brave crew of the Columbia. Number two, the loss of the brave crew of the helicopter that was looking for signs of the crew of the Columbia. And third, the recent devastation to NASA itself. Now, I realize those of you with NASA can't say what I'm about to say, but I was elected, and I believe it was because people know I was just call it like I see it. But the fact is, John Stuart Mill said, "The person who has nothing for which he's willing to fight, nothing which is more important than his own personal safety, is a miserable creature and has no chance of being free unless made and kept so by the exertions of better men than himself." He realized that if a society was going to reach the heavens, that people would have to be willing to risk everything they had to secure that and keep it. We had people on the Columbia who were willing to risk everything for the advancement of mankind. I love this scripture from Joshua, and I appreciate so much the reference that we're told from Scripture. To whom much is given, of whom much is required. But I also like to point you to what Jesus talked about in the parable of the talents. We've all been given some measure of talent. Some financially, some real talent. And I think God expects us to use what we've been given so that one day when we meet our Maker, He will say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And that's what you found with people in NASA, especially those who went out there and put their lives at risk out in space for the advancement of mankind. Everything they were, everything they had done and developed was out there on the line to advance and to use the talents with which God had endowed them. Now, Gene is right. I was spurred to leave the bench because I wanted to try to fix some things, and I felt like all I could do was rule on them as a judge. But one of the things that got me started thinking that way was how many women I started having coming into my court to be sentenced for a felony called welfare fraud. And the more you looked into it and the more you heard testimony from these women, the more it broke my heart. Now, I hold people accountable as a judge for what they did wrong. But you saw the history over and over that some young girl would get bored with high school and someone would tell them, "Well, why don't you just drop out and have a baby? The government will send you a check." And so they would, and then they would find out you can't really live on that check. It's not enough. So they would have another and another, and they would think, okay, one more, and then that'll be enough to live on. And it never was. It was not enough to really live even any kind of decent life. And so the ones that came before my court had decided, you know what, maybe if I get a job, I can start digging my way out of this rut with that income if I don't report it to the authorities, so I keep getting the child support from the federal government as well as the money I'm making. Then I maybe have a chance to get out of this rut. But that, when you didn't report it, that was called welfare fraud. It got you to my court for having committed a felony. But what really got me, though, it was this well-intentioned law back in the 60s that said, you know what, there's some deadbeat dads out there, and we're going to help you single women. We're just going to give you a check for every child you can have out of wedlock. 40 years later, we got what we paid for. And the government should not be about luring people into a rut from which they cannot get themselves. It ought to be about giving incentives. You want to finish high school, we'll give you incentives to do that. You need help with child care while you're getting through high school so you can have a better life. We'll give you incentives to do that. That's what NASA's about. It is helping mankind to reach for the stars and reach for the greatest within us. And from that effort, we have seen the greatest advancements in science that mankind has ever experienced. That's what government is supposed to be about. Not luring people into ruts, but helping them reach the stars. Now we're here today for this groundbreaking of a memorial to the people who believed we should strive for that greatness and not be mired in hopelessness. That NASA's purpose is to reach for the stars, not help some other country feel good about the contributions they've made to math and science. You may not recall, but John F. Kennedy, when he committed to put a man on the moon, he also made sure that Congress appropriated the resources to make it happen. And if you will go back and look, you will find that about 10% of the entire federal budget was NASA. And wow, what did we gain as a result? The greatest advancements mankind has ever made. Now, the budget for NASA is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. And although we've been told that the budget for NASA must be cut, actually the budget for NASA this year was increased. But the money, after it was appropriated for NASA, it's also indicated that money will be taken from NASA and then given to private companies that have curried favor with those in power right now. Now, if we do not turn our priorities back, away from the ruts, to reaching for the stars, if we do not pay tribute with our funds as a federal government, then it will be an even greater tragedy than the loss of these valiant, selfless, extraordinary, caring, brilliant, courageous crew members that we honor today. It will mean that we did virtually nothing with their loss to make America better. You and I are here, and I hope you will pledge with me that we will not let that happen without an extraordinary fight worthy of those for whom we come to pay tribute. And if we will do that, we will pledge ourselves to see that we pick back up the mantle and see that we strive toward greatness, not the ruts. Then and only then can we unashamedly pray and sing and ask that God continue to bless America. Thank you for caring as much as you do. God bless you.